Daniel Jebison, Promise David. These are two players that were named to Jesse Marsh's preliminary 60-man roster ahead of Nations League, which will be happening in the Final Four in March. I'm curious to know, as we look at these two players, Ollie, if you have an opinion on who the bigger get is for Canada.
I think it's Promise David at this moment in time, but I would caveat that by saying I don't say that with total certainty as to what we could be saying about these two players in a few years' time, because I still think there's a lot to be discovered here. That's always kind of been the case with Daniel Jebison. Like, there are qualities he has that I think clubs have always found intriguing. That's why, Sheffield United's brought him into their academy and into the first team. Then Bournemouth decided to pay some money to sign him, and he's still at the Premier League level. Like, he's fast, he's rangy, he's got a nose for the box. There is like the outline and the raw ingredients of a good striker there. I just don't think it has necessarily clicked yet. That could still happen. That breakout could still be coming with him. He's only 21 years old. And like I said, I do think there's an intriguing set of skills. But you have to say right now that Promise David is having that breakout, at a very good level at the top end of the Belgian league with a good club. He's just had, obviously, that brief taste of the Europa League as well. It's a remarkable story, the way he has risen up, like so many Canadians we've seen in this current national team group. Going to Malta, going to Estonia, playing for the B team of his Estonian club in the third tier there, and now scoring goals, creating goals in Belgium. And, you look at this club that he's playing for, Victor Boniface was having a similar experience a couple of years ago. Promise David's numbers are actually better than his. And he got picked up by Bayer Leverkusen. So I think there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of possibility in front of Promise David right now. And for me, just because that breakout is happening with him and you're starting to see what this player can be, which is a really intriguing, physically imposing striker, I think at this moment in time, he's the bigger get for the national team.
I respectfully disagree with my main man, Oliver Platt. I mean, you said it. He's been doing this at the top level of Belgian football, which is a good level. It's been impressive. It's worth a mention because it matters. 5 of his 13 goals have come from penalties. He's a penalty taker for the club as well. This isn't to knock Promise David. I need to see more of him, what he looks like coming into a national team setup, what he can do potentially at the next level, because there's a reason why Dan Jebison is part of a Premier League club, and a good one at that, Bournemouth right now. It's because his ceiling for me is higher. He's 21. Last year, it was a lost year for him, remember? Like, he was battling illness or injury, and he simply didn't play. And this year he goes out on loan, for me, to a club that makes far too many changes. Wasn't a good choice for him. Comes back from Bournemouth, but he's still part of the squad. He's still part of the environment. He's scored at that level as a teenager before as well. He's such an intriguing young talent for me that I think at the end of the day, when all said and done for his national team career, Dan Jebison could really have and do something special for Canada. And I firmly believe that. So it's not as much of a knock on Promise David, but the ceiling for Dan Jebison is just that much higher.
Good news, Canada now has both. And when we take a look at certain positions here, and in particular the striker, center forward, would you say, I don't know, Ollie, if you think that's the deepest position right now for Canada?
No, I don't think it is. I think, like, when you're talking about depth, obviously you're talking about how many players you can go down, but I still think you have to take into consideration the top end talent at the top of that list. And right now, for me, Canada is deepest at the fullback positions, where you've got one of, if not the best player in the world at left back in Alphonso Davies. You've got Alistair Johnston, who increasingly is putting himself in the conversation of some of the top right backs in Europe, the way he's playing for Celtic right now. And then beneath them, you have 2 of the standout Canadian MLS players in Sam Adekubi and Richie Larea. So I would say fullback is where they have the most kind of strength in depth right now. Mm-hmm. Striker, they have a lot of names, right? Like, I don't necessarily think we know who is going to be the impactful players from that list. Is it going to be David? Is it going to be Jebison, Tanielu O'Shea, Kwesi Poku, Santiago Lopez? I can go on and on. There's a lot of names there, but I think it's still less kind of clear who is going to be an impact player for Canada beyond Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. So I'll say the fullback positions.
And you didn't mention the name Kyle Larin, okay? A player who's still playing in La Liga. People treat this guy like he's 39 and not 29 and the joint best goal scorer in Canada history. It's crazy to me. He still has a significant role to play. To Ollie's point, there's strength in numbers, but whether it be Oluwaseyi, whether it be Russell Rowe, whether it be Bear, who else? You could throw out a bunch of names. None of those guys have shown that they could score goals on a regular basis with Canada. That's how you define, the strongest position or the biggest area of depth is players that can come in and do a job right away. I'm with Ollie, it's fullback, but I'd extend that out to all positions in wide areas, the wing positions for this program. And that's probably why John Herdman played wingbacks more so, because a lot of his players have the profile to play that. Go down the list. Schaffelberg and Ahmed played last window. Liam Miller's out through injury. Tajon Buchanan's coming back in. And then there's a depth of players behind that who are absolutely worthwhile naming and being in contention for those positions as well. So I just think in wide areas, they all fit the profile: young, athletic, have some high talent levels as well. So yeah, it's through the wide areas of the field. No doubt this team's the deepest.
Would you say midfield is still maybe more of a concern probably than anything else when it comes to depth?
I think center back depth. That's for me. You have Bombito and Cornelius who have stepped right in, but I still think there's some questions of who are the ready-made options. And I mean ready-made for 2026, players that are reliable in case one of those players go down. But Bombito for me is a one player, like positionally speaking, that you can't take out of the Canada team because there's no one like him that can replace him. And without him in the team, I think you're in trouble. So center back for me, center midfield right after that. Absolutely.
Still a question who plays with Estacio, right? Like Kone obviously has had a difficult season. Chouanier has had an injury, so there's options, but someone's, I think, still got to lay claim to that.
All right. Well, how about this? Because we know Sam Adekubi's been dealing with injury, and Jesse Marsh was very adamant in playing Alphonso Davies in that left back role, and it worked for the men's national team, no doubt about it. But now that Sam Adekubi has returned to form, do you think Jesse Marsh will play Alphonso Davies as that winger, Ollie, and put Adekubi back there?
Here we go.
It begins again.
Stir that pot again. Woohoo!
As far as the Nations League finals go next month, I don't think so. I don't think you really change much, to be honest with you. I know there's going to be a lot of people calling for one of the new strikers. We've already talked about Kyle Aaron, for changes of this type as well. I'd be surprised if Jesse Marsh messes too much with what has been a winning formula in his time in the job so far for these two games. It's a semi-final and hopefully a final. I don't think that's a time for experimentation. What I would say that is if Sam Adekubi is in good form and playing well for the Whitecaps and he started the season very well and you're late in a game and you're chasing a game and Jacob Schaffelberg maybe has run his race and needs to come off, are you going to your bench for someone to come on to replace him, or are you letting the leash off Alphonso Davies and pushing him forwards and Sam Adekubi can come on? That would be the context in which I could see him playing further forward in March.
Exactly that. I mean, watching this Canada team, Andy, like when the ball is played over the top, you either have Bombito or Davies going back to track it down. They make up space so quickly. The back four for me is as close of a lock as you can get to what we'll see here over the next, 14, 15 months into the World Cup. The Cornelius position, I mean, he's still playing decent. He's regular. The back four for me is the most kind of solid, what you're going to get position that Jesse Marsh has right now. So I wouldn't mess with that back four. I think they're all very good and they all play very well together. They're able to press. They're able to recover. I don't mess with that equation right now.
How about the Canadian women's national team? The 5th edition of the Pinatar Cup. They were crowned champions. They needed to win in their third and final game, and they did that. A sound victory, 7-0 over Chinese Taipei. But the big thing is we're really just looking to see what we can figure out from Casey Stoney, right? More than anything, new head coach. She did a lot of experimenting here, Ollie, with this squad. Having said that, though, we did see players stand out that in the past did not get a lot of time under Bev Priestman. What were your overall takeaways?
Yeah, I think you can point to some of those players. I really think Emma Regan is a good player. She continues to impress me and looks like she has a big part to play at the base of that midfield, brings the kind of skill set that they've been lacking a little bit probably since Desiree Scott, her role reduced in this team. Great to see Mimi Aladu continue to impress. You have to caveat this with the opponents, right? And that they have to prove this against bigger teams, better teams going forwards here. And so there's only so many conclusions you can draw on that front. What I think is more interesting is what you mentioned off the top there, Andy, which is learning more about Casey Stoney and her intentions and how she wants this team to play. And the big difference in all three games compared to Bev Priestman, I'm not sure if Bev Priestman ever did this. I'd have to look back. 2 strikers. This is a team that has struggled to find one proven striker over the past few years who can be reliable and who can play week in, or not week in, week out, window in, window out at that position. And now Casey Stoney seems intent on picking 2 of them. So how those partnerships develop, I think it was very clearly a work in progress at this camp. Who are those players going to be who take those roles and are the starters for Canada in those positions? Obviously, it looks a lot more like the men's national team with David and Laren being that consistent partnership. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. And that was the big takeaway for me.
All right.
I'm a 4-2-2 fan, 4-4-2.
Like
bring it all day. Can I just mention these comments about Aliadou, which were a little bit surprising to me, that it kind of came off the context that they were put in, that the former manager, like, why weren't they using her? I think that it needs to be said that Aliadou is 29 years old. Like, she's been overlooked in club football every step of the way. So whether she's a late bloomer, whether the success is coming against inferior competition, which it was in this tournament, it's just something to take into consideration. I think the comments can often become misconstrued or lack a little context. So the context should be clear what the player is and kind of the pathway that she's taken. 29 years old and now just getting a look with the national team and club football at a decent club as well.
Yeah. Well, A, love a feel-good story. B, love a story of perseverance, especially in the world of sport. And that's exactly what Mimi Aliadou is doing right now, is never giving up. And here she is, I guess, blossoming. But to your point, I think we all want to see, A, consistency from this team, and B, we want to see it against tougher opponents. But what we also know is Casey Stoney has made it perfectly clear that she will look at the NSL. She will look at young players. She will figure out who can make this team. So when we go from a 29-year-old, how about this? Check out this goal from an 18-year-old.
Steal. Stolen. Chukwu and Hunter the goals. Chukwu gliding past O'Brien. Chukwu on the move. Oh, wow! Chukwu! Oh, that is a stunner! She can't even believe it. That is magic. Steals O'Brien's soul, spins back inside. Second of the game, 3 up for Canada.
I call that the Dipsy Doodle Spinorama. So that is Annabelle Chukwu. 7 goals in 3 games at the under-20 tournament, more than 30 goals in 26 games. For country. You can talk about the defenders all you want, but at the end of the day,
that was
defending horrible. But here's the thing.
Where was number 3 going? Oh, I don't know. Come on, man. But, number 3.
But this again,
like a glitch.
This again is more about Casey Stoney and looking at young players, right? Do you think that Chukwu should be on her radar here, Ollie?
Yes, I think she should. I think there will be a few players in that U20 group who already are and probably were, kept for this tournament. Maybe they shouldn't have been because, to be honest, it was an absolute breeze for Canada as we saw from the results. But I think going back to what we talked about before, like the national team has a role to play in pushing these players on and advancing their careers. So, and I think that's been the frustration with players like Mimi Aliadou is it kind of happened with Chloe Lacasse as well. Like she's playing with Benfica, playing very well, scoring a lot of goals. Didn't really get much of a look with the national team. And then she joins Arsenal and it's like, oh, all of a sudden she's good enough, right? And I think the national team and the men have done this very well under John Herdman, and Jesse Marsh, I think, continues to do it, is if you can spot talent that is maybe playing at a little bit of a lower level, give them that national team platform and give them a chance to play with Fleming, Buchanan, Gilles, these types of players who are playing at the highest levels. It puts them in the shop window for their club careers as well. We've seen that with Buchanan, with Johnston over the years with the men. I think the women can do something similar, and that absolutely includes some of the up-and-coming young players like Annabelle Chukwu.